Hey guys, this is the cold steel American Lawman. This is my first cold steel folder. Now I do have 4 cold steel fixed blades, the Finbear, the Bushman, Kukri Machete, and SRK. The first 3 are from their budget line, and as such, they're just great tools. The less you pay for a knife, the more likely you are to use it to the extreme and find out, wow, you know, this Bushman is really a cool tool. You can do just about anything with it. I mean, you can turn that thing into a spear. You can dig with it, you can split wood with it, with the sheath. It's just a great tool. But I wanted to try a cold steel folder. The main reason was that in my video about the Endura, I talked about the backlock issue, that all backlock knives will have this issue, at least most of them, most of the ones I've handled. When you cut something, hard materials, the blade will push against the backlock, moving the backlock into your hand. It will protrude from the scales, and the knife will feel like it has that forward-backward blade play, feel a bit unstable. In my opinion, this is not an issue. A lot of people said, well, if you want something that won't do that, try the cold steel triad lock. I must admit I didn't know. I didn't really pay much attention. I didn't pay much attention to cold steel folders because they are very expensive in Europe. Not so expensive in the States, but once they get over here, it's the tactical factor, I think. However, I looked into it and I saw the triad lock. It's a back lock with a little bolt in between the back lock and the blade, which takes all the pressure. And I said, that's something that's very easy to invent. Genius. But I didn't know how it felt. This is actually the first cold steel folder that I am holding in my hands and with which I have cut stuff with. Got this 3.5 weeks ago, and I wanted to make a first impressions video. That didn't pan out. This is still a first impressions video. I mean, I've worked with this knife for, this is the 3rd weekend I work with it, just cut random stuff with. So this is just a first impressions video. So the fact that I wanted to try out the triad lock was one reason. Then the steel CTS XHP, second reason. I've heard only good things about it, but different people will use different steels with different edge angles for different things, and you never know if you're gonna like it or not. For some tasks, I do still like to use my Rat 1 with OS 8 steel, really soft. Not the steel, the tempering is, well, the heat treatment, not the best. However, for some things, I rather have the edge bend than chip. Wanted to try the steel, wanted to try the triad lock, found it for a very good price. I said, have to try it. And when I received this knife, got it out of the packaging, first thing I noticed was, this is a very wide knife. You can watch videos, you can read specs, and for some knives it's true, for some it isn't, but for some knives you really won't be able to tell how wide they're going to be in your hand, how they're going to feel in your hand. I said, wow, this is pretty wide. And holding it, I realized, wow, this is pretty thin. Now thin and wide is not always a good combination. Best example, the Lion Steel SR1A. Not a good combination. Very uncomfortable. Couple that with thick grind, steep edge angle. It's a pretty knife, but not a good worker. I said, but it does have these cutouts, and a lot of people said it's very comfortable, so I didn't worry about it. I opened up the knife and I said, wow, it opens it up real smooth, and there's no side-to-side blade play, which is always a very important thing to me. I don't like to have side-to-side blade play. Even with my fidgety folders. I prefer to have a solid folder. I don't know why. The 940, which is still my ADC knife, I like to keep a bit loose. It's because it's fun to play with. But when I go around the cabin and do stuff with it, I will tighten up the pivot so I don't have the side-to-side blade play. Not that you can feel it that much. However, smooth opening, no side-to-side, pretty cool. I said, let's see the sharpness. And I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying this. This is the sharpest knife out of the box that I've got. Now I've bought some new Spydercos, I bought some new Benchmades. My ZTs were secondhand, but one wasn't used. So this is the sharpest folder out of the box that I've ever received. It shaved hair effortlessly. For the first week, I used the factory edge because factory edges are sometimes weaker. Just with stropping, after I cut stuff, it will go back to shaving sharp. After that, I did modify the edge angle, dropped it down a bit, took it to that true 20 degrees per side that all my other folders have. This is an edge angle with which I'm familiar with. For everyday tasks, for me, it's low enough. For harder woods, it's high enough that they won't sustain any damage. For me, it works 20 degrees per side, and it was very close to that. Similarly, Spydercos, very close to 20 degrees per side, pretty much all of their folders. Ever since I've only stropped it, this is not a high polish finish. It's actually a very coarse finish. I've just dropped the micro bevel I put on it with a strop, so maybe an extra 1 or 2 degrees. And it does excellent. It's an excellent slicer because of the hollow ground blade. A very well made hollow ground blade. Now this knife, for me, is something else. First time I held it in hand, somehow it didn't align. It was going to this side or it was going to this side a bit. Until I cut my first cardboard box with it. And then it just, doing a slicing cut, it just fit in my hand. I said, that's weird. Very weird. Now, it is still a very thin and wide folder. My first question was, I wonder how it feels with gloves. The Spyderco Tenacious, not one of my favorite folders for all the hype it generated, did feel very good with gloves. So I said, maybe, but I'll get to that later. Started cutting cardboard, plastic, food, and eventually when I got to the cabin, a lot of wood. I said, you know what, it's not the most comfortable folder, but if you're not going to do push cuts, you're pretty well taken care of here. In my opinion, this is not a bushcraft folder. In my opinion, this is not an EDC folder for just anybody. I'll tell you why in a minute. But if you are going to do slice cuts, the shape of the handle will lock your hand in place. If you're gonna do detailed work, choke up on it. This is gonna be good enough. It's gonna help you out, and your hand is still locked in place. If you're gonna do a reverse grip and stab the knife into a piece of wood as hard as you can, and it's gonna hurt your hand because of this indents right here, this beak right here, but your hand is not going to slip on the blade. That much is almost 100% certain if you have a tight grip. This is the way it was thought out, I think. Easy opening, very easy opening. I mean, smooth. And if with my left hand I can do it without even flicking my wrist, almost all the time, not on camera of course, we're gonna stay here until I get it. Easy opening with a bit of wrist flick, no problem. Very safe in an open position. The triad lock really is one of the safest locking mechanisms built, and difficult to close. And this was one thing on which not a lot of YouTubers commented. I've seen 2 that commented on this issue. It is very difficult to disengage the back lock. With my right hand, I can do it about 3 or 4 times in a row until my thumb starts hurting. With my left hand, it hurts a bit, but I don't have a problem disengaging the lock. But when it's brand new, it's very stiff. And the first day, my thumbs hurt very much. And then my index fingers and my middle fingers, they started hurting because I kept wanting to play with it. This is not a fidgety knife. This is not a knife that you're going to say, oh, you know, I want an EDC knife. I want something dependable. I don't really need a knife, but in case I do, how about the Lawman, the American Lawman from Cold Steel? You're not going to be happy with it probably. If you don't need to cut stuff with it and you just like to play around with it. Now, the older versions had a thinner tensioning bar. You can, I say tensioning bar, I don't know the exact term. It's the bar that keeps the lock back up. You can they had a thinner one. You can probably shave this one down, reduce the resistance. I will not do that because you know what? I actually enjoy the fact that this lock needs so much pressure to be disengaged. This is not going to happen by accident. Now, with a lock back, you can have that failure, you know, when you do a spine whack test, which spine whack tests are not the best tests in my opinion, but you know what? If you can have a knife that won't fail during a spine whack test, why not? If you need that, or if you want that. My point is, the point I was trying to make is, you will not disengage this by accident. Doesn't really matter the grip you're gonna have on it. Like this, no chance. If you're gonna have a piece of wood large enough so you can put enough pressure to disengage this here, I'm putting my thumb in between the lockback and my hand, pushing on it, and I put a lot of pressure there. My thumb hurts, you can see it. So this will not happen by accident. You'll feel if you have something in here that will probably disengage the blade. If you're gonna hold it in a chest lever grip and just squeeze it as much as you can with your thumb on the lockback, with your middle finger on the lockback, I can do it, but it takes a lot of pressure. I'm doing this because I want to, not by accident. So I think this was meant to be a tactical, hard use folder for people who really need a knife or really want to have a knife that can do these things. Not for somebody who wants to play around with their knives. Not for somebody who says, you know what, I like doing this all day long, and occasionally I'm gonna cut a pizza box to make it more compact because we recycle, or I'm gonna cut some wrappers, I'm gonna cut some paper, I'm gonna cut some... No. I look at this as a hard use working knife for somebody who's gonna need it. He's gonna pull it out of his pocket, open it very, very easily, then cut whatever it needs to cut. And then put it back in his pocket where it's going to be very safely stored because of all the tension here. Now the pocket clip does have a lot of tension in it because we got to it. If you have thicker seams on your pants, like I do on these, just putting the knife in my pocket like this, it's going to catch the whole seam. So I actually do have to go with my fingernail under the pocket clip and then slide it in where it's going to be in very safely. I don't have to do that with other knives, but with this one I do. There's a fix for this. Bend the pocket clip out, Sand G10 if you don't want it to rip your pockets, or put less tension. Get a custom pocket clip, and so on and so forth, if it's something that bothers you. And I understand that some people want to buy a knife and they want it ready to go. I enjoy that too. When I pay over $50 for a knife, or over 20, let's say, because Gonzo knives cost about $15–20, and they come sharp out of the box and they're ready to work. Some more expensive knives aren't. That bothers me, and I can understand how it bothers some people. But I always nowadays try to see what the knife can do for the purpose it was designed for, and it doesn't bother me. Like I said 5–6 times, I see this as a hard use tactical folder. And for me, hard use is the main thing. Very safe locking mechanism, and apparently a good steel. So far I have no chips in the edge. I did cut mainly clean materials, but we'll see in time. Now, this knife does not have nested liners to reduce the weight, and it does not feel unstable in hand. It feels just like it had them, but for the weight, which is less. And that's a nice touch. Finger groove and choil work very well. Somehow I can't get over this. I can't find a single flaw with this knife. The jimping. My opinion about jimping is that if it's there, it shouldn't bother you. And this one is here for indexing mainly. It does not bother me at all. Now, if you're to cut wood with this, do a lot of push cuts, it is going to be uncomfortable in hand. Like I said, slicing, much better for that. Choking up on the blade, not the most comfortable knife. But then you're going to know this when you get this sort of knife. I mean, here's your grip, here's the cutting edge. Okay, we're going to give you the opportunity to choke up for fine detail work, but it's not going to be as comfortable. If you want that, get something like this. Excellent slicer. This is my favorite model, by the way, the rucksack. This always comes out with me. It's a bit dinged up, but I mainly use the saw on it, by the way. Very useful for the outdoors. Something like this. More inexpensive, better slicer, and I would say more comfortable in hand. Definitely more comfortable in hand. Not as safe if you want to take it down to the roughest of conditions. Not as safe. The steel, not as good. So, you know, always pluses and minuses. The generic shape of the blade is just that, a nice draw point blade, very good for stabbing it into things and doing stuff with the tip. You can really get a good purchase on it because of these cutouts here. And if you want to, I don't know, put a hole in a piece of wood, this is going to be just take this stick. This is going to be quite easy to control. I mentioned the fact that the Spyderco Paramilitary was a bit boxy. And a lot of people commented on that the Spyderco Paramilitary is such a comfortable knife. Yes, it's a comfortable knife. And boxy does not mean bad. This is a boxy knife. Has a boxy feeling to it. If you are to compare it with the Rat 1, this one's 10 years old, by the way. I think this fall. Great knife. Put a convex grind on it if you have the AUS 8 steel on it, and it'll just be a great slicer. Very comfortable in hand. Also in a reverse grip. Also has this cutout. This one is boxier. In case you're preparing food, cutting up meat, where your hands are wet, greasy, this is going to be easier to control. Same is true for this one. Very easy to control because of the shape, because of the very aggressive G10, because of the thinness and the width. So may not be the best bushcraft knife, may not be the most fidget friendly EDC knife, but for what it was made for, I cannot find a single flaw with it. The blade is covered in this DLC, diamond-like coating. This blade is covered in DLC. They're very different. This one has a matte finish. It is a bit rougher. I imagine it would introduce a bit of more friction when you're cutting cardboard wood than this. And this one, after everything I've done with it, not much, like I said. This would be the third weekend. But I did cut a lot of wood with it. And if I wipe it down, it looks almost like brand new. There are a few minute scratches on it, but nothing serious. So, very good job. The spine is still decently sharp. I did not strike a ferro rod with it. I don't intend to. What I did do was scrape some bark off. Whenever I hang up my backpack, I take a small stick and use that to lash the carabiner around, just so that I pull the stick out and it's easier to take it all off. And instead of cleaning up the bark from the stick like this, I said, whoa, wait a minute, I can just do this. Clean up all the little knots. So this works. Once again, hard use folder. I like that because it doesn't have paint on it, but it's this DLC. Initially I thought it was paint. I didn't look that much into it. These were not things that I cared about. I cared about the triad lock and the CTS XHP, and I got so much more. This is not going to be an EDC knife. I did carry it for 6 days with me. It's not fidget friendly. I don't need a knife in my day-to-day life. I like to have a knife, play with a knife. So this is not going to be an EDC knife, but this will be a cabin knife, a working knife, a hiking knife, simply because whenever I'm there I don't fidget around with knives. I just tend to use them or take them out of my pocket and open them when I need them. And so far I'm impressed. If all cold steel folders are built like this, I can see myself looking into a few more models. I think the Finwolf and the SR1 or whatever they call it, a few models. This is very well made for the purpose in mind for which it was built. Hats off to Cold Steel. I was pleasantly surprised, and time will tell if I will like the steel. I hope you liked the video. I hope I didn't forget anything in this 24 minutes of talking. This will not be a knife that I will baton, even if I consider this locking mechanism to be very stable, very safe. I don't find a need to do that. For that, I always have a Ganza with me. And I do prefer the axis lock over the triad lock or the back lock, the frame lock, the liner lock, the compression lock, and probably any other lock. Why? Because I can baton this knife, and as it is the case for this one, the liner got a bit dinged, so now I have the slightest forward-backward blade play. But it's nothing. If, however, you were to baton a liner lock knife and that dings up a bit, the knife will have a lot of blade play. You won't be able to close the knife probably, or the liner will break and you will have a slip joint without a back spring. Not ideal. Same thing for all the other locking mechanisms. I'm not debating whether the liner lock is better than the compression lock or this one's stronger than that one. I'm saying for me, the axis lock, fidget friendly, fairly safe. I mean, you could disengage this by accident, no doubt. But if I want a Batana folder, I'll probably Batana Gonzo. $15, $20. I tend to use them as working knives quite often. And yes, I will use this one. I will test it. I'm probably not going to pry with it, not the hardest of things, and I might stab it into things when I actually need to open something. I'm not going to do that in a piece of wood. It might break, I don't know. But for what I will be able to do with it, I will do with it, and I will probably, who knows, months, years away from this moment, I'll let you know what I think about it. So far, very impressed. I hope you liked the video. If there's anything I forgot to mention, and you know it, mention it in the comment section. If there's any questions or suggestions you would have, also in the comment section. I appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd like to thank you for watching, and as always, I wish you all a great day.